I'm Julie Enszer. I'm excited for our discussion this evening about the film The Gentleman Bank Robber. Our opening music was from Carol Kramer and Your Girlfriend. The song was Peace and Harmony. And more information about the music is available in the chat. Let's see, I have a couple noisy mics that I'm going to mute right now. And I'm coming to that announcement shortly. But before we begin, I want to spend a moment for a land acknowledgement. We are all located around the United States and around the world, many, if not all of us, on occupied, unceded land. I am in what is now Dover, Florida, traditional homelands and territories of the Seminole. Our tradition now is to pause at the beginning of our events to recognize the histories of war and colonization, and to imagine and work for a world where we have a more fair and equitable distribution of resources. I invite people to put into the chat the location of where you are and honor the original inhabitants of your land. Now, we have a chakra block hour planned for you. As always, we're going to wrap up around 8 o'clock on the East Coast. Ooh, it looks like Zulma might have sound.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, awesome.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, I'm thrilled. Oh, good.
Okay.
All right. So we'll wrap up at 8 o'clock, including time for our traditional dance number. I always do a little advertisement about Sinister Wisdom, but we're getting a late start. And I can tell looking over the list that many of you are already friends, fans, and subscribers to Sinister Wisdom. So thank you for all of that. I'll forego some of that. I will note we had an error with our renewal letters. So some people who had recently renewed or have longstanding subscriptions received a renewal letter in error. If you think that is you, shoot me an email, give me a call at the office. I am sorting it out for everyone. And if you renewed in error or with a couple extra, I always extend the renewals by the number of the issue, so no one's ever shorted issues. A few housekeeping notes. Keep your microphones muted. I was muting people as you were coming in the room. As you've seen, if there's noise, we will mute you. If you want to show appreciation for readers, wave your hands at the end of each reading and use the reaction emojis on Zoom. Feel free to test those now. I see everyone is already lighting up the chat. I encourage you to do that. If you need technical assistance, as you've seen, the ever intrepid Sierra, who's, I think her screen name is Sinister Wisdom this evening, is on tap for technical assistance. Sierra's already solved one issue. So we'll give her a little credit for that. And finally, we are recording the event this evening. We will make it available tomorrow or Thursday at sinisterwisdom.org/SW126. So now I'm going to introduce what we're actually all here for this evening. And thank you again so much for joining us. Jane Segal, who's one of the co-editors of the current issue of Sinister Wisdom 126, Out of Control, recommended this film to me, The Gentleman Bank Robber, the story of Butch lesbian freedom fighter Rita Bo Brown, in conjunction with the work on this issue of the journal. Sinister Wisdom 126, Out of Control, is dedicated to two activists, Bo Brown being one of them and Mo Kalman being the other. And this evening, we're going to talk about Bo Brown's life, this incredible film, and the political actions and resistances of Bo Brown through the George Jackson Brigade. There are three people who are going to be a part of our panel. We're going to start out with the first two, Jane Segal, who co-edited Sinister Wisdom 126, Out of Control, and Zulma Oliveras Vega, a Puerto Rican activist and contribute to the issue. And then after they have a little bit of discussion, we're going to bring in the filmmaker, the wonderful Julie Perini, to join us in this conversation. I'm so excited, Zulma and Jane, to welcome you both here this evening. And we wanted to start out with each of you telling me and our audience a bit about your personal experiences with Bo Brown. So I invite us to kind of begin that way, bringing Bo Brown into the room in blessed memories.
Are you
Who's
waiting?
going?
Go ahead.
Zulma, Jane.
Okay.
Oh, Zulma was going to start.
Okay. I have a little bit of allergy, so I might sound weird. Thank you for having this opportunity to be here again with Sinister Wisdom and with Jane, and also being former member of the Coalition for Vieques and Freedom for Puerto Rico in San Francisco, and the Sparks Light Committee, and Out of Control, and having the experience to be with the San Francisco Light March as well. Now in Puerto Rico, I'm working more with the two-spirit communities and working with domestic violence and sexual assault, how to do better practice with survivors. Uh, so meeting Bo was in 2000. I just happened to end a relationship that was for 6 years, and the first thing that Bo said to me, "I'm gonna give you 6 months. And if you don't start dating, I'm gonna start making blind dates for you." And that was the first time I met Paul through Denise Alvarado, that was also is also a member of the Out of Control and Sparks Flight, and Puerto Rican activist. So that was the rough funny part about Bo, that always had uh, when talking to people and caring for people. And that day, Bo took me to meet Motown at her birthday party that they were having up north in San Francisco. So for me, it was amazing to come from just moving from Puerto Rico to Pittsburgh, where I went to university, and then moving to the Bay Area, thinking that activism was dead and civil rights movements was dead. To meet this bunch of women at this party, and Bo introducing me to them and saying the kind of work that they were doing, I was like a kid, excited, because I was also the youngest one in the group. So for me, it was really good to learn that about the Black movement, about the young lords. I didn't know about the political prisoners until I met Bo and Mo and Jane, that they would do with Sparkslides fundraisers to help with the commissary of the women political prisoners and other women political prisoners that were there. So uh, to me, they just became mentors, because in Puerto Rico, where I grew up in the 80s, the education, I come from the southwest of the island, where the capital is in the north. And so the education was very scarce about, we lack that kind of education about human rights and our own history. So uh, for me to leave the island and to found this treasure of women that were down to do anything, and then to see Bo's documentary, I was like, what the hell? I born in the wrong time? For me to do something like that, I would just, in Puerto Rico, around the corner, there will be somebody already waiting for me to get me if I do such a thing in 2022. So um, I got really inspired, and I learned a lot from not just Bo's story, and also the sacrifices that Bo had to make. And the most beautiful part, it was how humble and how caring and how loving Bo was with people. And so I know that Mo Kalman was the same kind of hard person, but since we're talking about the documentary and specifically about Bo, I want to focus on that without forgetting that Mo was also my uncle. Like Mo would say, Tio Mo to me, and Tio Bo. So I was really lucky to have this extended family that are also here tonight. But I'm going to stop there and let Jane talk more
Okay.
about it.
Well, I met Bo soon after. Bo and I were very close, and I met her soon after she paroled from FCI Dublin, federal prison in Dublin, California, and she paroled to San Francisco, and she actually lived with Julie, who was a very close friend of mine. Julie and her partner Blue contributed in here about Out of Control in that Sinister Wisdom magazine. And so she lived with Julie in the mission, and I met her then. And then in 1987, the Bureau of Prisons opened up this very horrendous high security unit, which we also talk about a lot in here. And so you can learn about it there. And we, a few of us, Bo, another woman named Jay Mullins, myself, and a woman named Judith Merkinson formed a committee, a women's committee, in response to a political prisoner named Sylvia Beraldini, who was moved from FCI Dublin to that high security unit in Lexington, Kentucky. And Susan Rosenberg and Alondrina Torres, a Puerto Rican prisoner of war, were already in that unit. And so there's a lot of history. There's a lot of history in here about that unit and about what happened. So that's how Bo and I met. We formed that committee, the four of us, which emerged, it morphed, it changed, and became Out of Control Lesbian Committee to Support Women Political Prisoners and Prisoners, Puerto Rican Prisoners of War. Very long name. Several years later, and I don't know, Bo and I did a lot of work together over more than 25 years. But I say that she was very solid. She was solidly my friend. She showed up for people, both politically and personally. And that was something very special about her. She was very strategic, and she also pushed a politic, and we had a political understanding that was very intersectional at the time, because we're talking about the late 80s and the 90s, and now people talk about intersectional all the time. I mean, it's a buzzword and people talk about it. But at the time, she was, intersecting class and race and gender and queer liberation. We were clearly against the patriarchy. I mean, we clearly accused and were against the patriarchy and also capitalism. However, we brought all these things, and Bo brought these things together in Out of Control. She was very funny. She had a great sense of humor. I think that Julie's film, The Gentleman Bank Robber, shows a lot of the, you'll see the clips if you haven't watched it yet. I hope you will watch it if you haven't. A lot of intimate examples of Bo, just talking and being Bo. And she had an enormous commitment to the struggle that taught a lot of us a lot. She'd been in and out. She was in jail earlier, before she was a political prisoner. She did hard time as a Butch freedom fighter, because she was Butch in particular, did a harder time, meaning she was moved around a lot. I mean, they were not nice to her, okay? She really understood what we needed to do in terms of winning, and that was really buckle in and be there for the long haul. There's another great documentary actually called Through the Wire. Jan Sussler, one of the attorneys that worked on the Lexington High Security Unit, closing it, just put in the chat, called Through the Wire, and Julie is gonna watch it. And I mistakenly didn't share it earlier with her, but thank you, Jan. And she had a deep sense of humanity. She was a regular, down-to-earth, working-class Butch dyke from Southern Oregon. She loved kids, dogs, and people. The Gentleman Bank Robber, she was much more than that too. She helped many when they needed help in deep ways, and that included me. She helped raise my son, Jesse Ray. who had a lot of problems at that time. And so she really was there for me in a very personal way as well as a political way. And I think I've said enough, huh?
That's great. Thank you so much, Jane. We're going to pick up themes from these opening comments as we go through this discussion, but I want to start out first showing a brief little clip from the film that Sierra has teed up that really, I think one of the things I wanted to do is to remind us all of the exigency of the times and the political stakes that people saw and understood and connected to their lives. Particularly Bo. So Sierra, go ahead and share screen. We have a short, I think it's about a 2.5-minute clip that we're going to show, and then Jane and Zulma are going to, I'll pose a question and they'll respond.
Talking about stuff. And Pearl brought me a book and said, I want you to read this book, but you cannot let anyone know that you're reading this book. And it was a copy of George Jackson's books. The George Jackson book talked about, one, the prison system, the racism in the prison system, and how we needed to, how people needed to like stand up and fucking fight back, okay? And it made perfect sense to me, and it gave me a lot to think about. And while I was reading that book, George Jackson was killed. And those women in that prison, when George Jackson was killed, sat down for a day. And a month later, when Attica happened, they sat down for a week. And they didn't work, and they didn't do anything. They just stayed in their cells. And you never hear about that anywhere. I didn't understand all of it, but I knew that I was supposed to do what I was supposed to do, which was, you know, not do what the police wanted me to do, but do what my sister prisoners wanted me to do.
We are cozy, cuddly, armed, and dangerous, and we will raise the fucking prisons to the ground.
We are cozy, cuddly, armed, and dangerous, and we will raise the fucking prisons to the ground.
We are cozy and cuddly, armed and dangerous, and we'll raise the fucking prisons to the ground.
The George Jackson Brigade was an armed struggle group, one of many that existed during the mid-70s. George Jackson was a prisoner in California, the Field Marshal of Defense for the Black Panther Party.
This terrorism won't work on us. It won't stop our movement. That nothing, actually, short of death, is going to stop our movement.
His analysis of the struggle, that there had to be armed struggle. That's what Blood in My Eye and the other books he wrote were about. And he took that to the limit in prison, armed struggle, and he built solidarity among people who were never really solid before. So that seemed like a really good theme for the brigade.
When you're engaged in armed struggle, you have reached a level of understanding that this is a battle of life and death. Mm-hmm. They are not going to give it up, okay? They are not going to give it up. You have to take it back.
There were armed groups here in Portland, 2 in Seattle, San Francisco, Los Angeles, even Portland, Maine. We felt that these groups, in combination with the mass struggle, could be the broom that helped to sweep U.S. imperialism into the dustbin of history.
Thank you so much, Sierra. So Zulma and Jane, will you talk? I mean, I think we see in that clip some of the ways that Bo articulates solidarity, the intersectionality element of it that you talked about, Jane. But also, I think for me, it brings back a moment of political urgency that folks on the left really experienced that I think is sometimes harder for people living today to connect with in certain ways. Certainly some people really connect with it. And I think that there are activists today who really look to this moment for inspiration. But I think for other people, it feels farther away, and reconnecting to it is important. So I wanted to ask each of you to talk a little bit about what Beau's activism meant to you.
Go ahead.
For me, like I was saying earlier, both taught me a lot. I came from a background that even when my parents are independentistas, there was a lot of protection there because of the fear of what was happening during those years in Latin America too, with children being kidnapped and from the leftists. So I think that has to do a little bit also with my background in Puerto Rico and not knowing so much about what was going on around us. So meeting Beau was like, besides the humor, there was always this firm message, and that's where I started to understand what it was, what by any means necessary. And that's why I started to understand that, you know, I live in a land that is occupied by the United States. And that's when I started to understand that I had to participate with the people of Vieques to get the Navy out of there, because the rates of cancer were too high at this point that even children were being affected by it. So Beau taught me how to confront and to not be afraid, but also to be careful on how we organize to face the system over here. And moving back to Puerto Rico, all the things that I did together around Beau and Out of Control and Sparkslight, and even with the Bay Area Boricuas, I didn't think I could do it here on my own land. So for me, it was a good way to be around somebody who really meant, who, as a white person, who wanted to do reparations for other people of color, that also brought me in terms of my own colorism, because I know that I'm a people of color, but over here, I also understand my privilege for being lighter skinned mestiza. So it's a lot of intersections that Beau was able to connect with me and to introduce me to other political prisoners, and to be with Jane also, because it was always who I was always with when we did this kind of things. So I think in Puerto Rico, there's so much work to do. There's a lot of oppression by the police. But at the same time, I know that there's a lot of vigilantes for the coast. And what I mean vigilantes, I say it in a positive way, that is people like me watching for the people who believe in destroying the shores so that they can build. So that's what Beau taught me, and to play it forward, to teach it forward, because we need to organize rather than separate from each other. And so right now, that's what I'm trying to do while I'm over here, and I always will honor what I learned with Beau, and I will put it always in practice, because it's necessary, and it has to be like a cycle for somebody else to pass the baton, and then the next person. And look at Palestine, Palestine is also doing their thing, and I was there too. I was there sitting down in front of tanks and talking about Puerto Rico, that how we were all so similar, but so different, because we didn't have the kind of destruction that they're having right now, because we already had it when the Spaniards came. So, Beau was a really great mentor, and it gets me excited to talk about this kind of stuff, because I You know, I know that I shouldn't say it, but I have fun doing civil disobedience for whoever needed it. And I will continue to teach or to do it for whoever needs it here in my own hometown. So, yes.
Well, thank you, Zulma. So for me, Bo was a really important co-conspirator. That's what I would say. And we worked together on so many different projects, T-shirt project, tabling, a radio program with Noel Hanrahan. We worked on together. We worked on the newsletter a lot together. We worked writing together a lot. And I learned she had a really much more direct, she had a really direct way of saying things and putting it that was different than me. And so I learned from that. Like she had these quirky little expressions too. She said, time flies when you're not doing it. And she's referencing, you know, you're not in jail, time, doing time. And so we called our newsletter Out of Time, or she just these expressions. And I would never, of course, I was never in jail. And so I was never in prison. So that wasn't my experience. I learned a lot. I learned a lot from that. And we were doing all that work together. We very much fed off of each other's energy, and we were both very committed and in for the long haul. And 26 years of working together and out of control is a long time to work with somebody and work with a group, any kind of group. So it was really special for me. What else can I say?
I wanted to add what you said about the prison, because I only spent a weekend in the prison in San Francisco, and it took them like 24 hours to figure it out if I was a woman or a guy. So they kept me in the cell alone for a long time. So just when you mentioned that about Bo, you know, during those years, it takes a lot of patience and guts to really tolerate what Bo had to face while being there. So yes, it was not just the political part; it was also the, you know, the sexuality and the whole phobias too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It was good. It was very good. It was very good for me because Bo, as I said, Bo had a more direct. She had a more direct way. I mean, she was a butch working class white woman from Southern Oregon, and I am not from that background at all. And so it was really good. I mean, she was a co-conspirator for me, and that was a very important thing for me over those years, as were some other people.
I want to pull in Julie Perini now. Julie is the filmmaker. And Julie, would you start out by talking a little bit about what brought you to this project? And I assume you have some, Bo in some ways was inspired you. And so if you could talk a bit about that you brought to the film.
Sure. Yeah. Thank you all so much for having me. It's just making my heart swell to listen to you all talk about her. This is really special and celebratory, and I just really appreciate this space here. But to answer your question about how this all got started, I normally, right now I'm not, but normally I live in Portland, Oregon, and I suppose when I arrived in Portland in 2007, I started working with communities in town who were working either on, on prison abolition or police accountability activist projects. And so Bo was often, and the other brigade members were often invited to speak at conferences and things in town. And so, she was really looked at as a mentor to a lot of people at that time. And so, I guess, I met her at one of those conferences, and a couple of friends that I worked on this project with, like actually as Jane and Zulma are talking, I'm thinking about the kind of comrades I have who I work on projects a lot with in Portland. And it's just reminding me of how important those particular relationships are, you know, especially when they're generative and you really are making things happen after over, it looks like decades for you all. It's really amazing. And so, so a couple of friends, Lydia Bartholow and Aaron McNamara, who also made the film with me, did a lot of the interviewing. Like, I'm much more a technical filmmaker and did, you know, most of that type of stuff, but they were definitely there in the beginning and did all the interviewing and helped with the editing. Lydia had known Bo, and so it was mostly Lydia's idea actually to, at first we thought make a very short film about Bo. You know, it was like, you know, this sense of why don't more people know about Bo's life story? You know, we're getting to know her through these relationships, but we want her story out there more. We want more stories of everything you're talking about her intersectional identity out there. We want more butch working class lesbians, radicals, ex-prisoners, you know, people who'd been in prison kind of stuff. So we thought it would be a short thing. We thought we'd go down one weekend and talk to Bo and somehow make a film about it. And then several years later, like 5 years later, you know, of course, we realized right away that Bo's story couldn't be contained. It's more than the 45 minutes the film is, but it was definitely needed more than 10 minutes and needed more than one weekend interview, you know. And so we went down to visit a couple of times, and kind of were embedded. Like the first time we lived with Etang and Bo for a few days and just did kind of oral history style interviews, which is actually maybe worthwhile for all of you to know. Like, we have tons more than what is there, you know, and I actually want to sort of preserve that somehow, so that other people could access it. Like, there's just much more conversation, many more details of her life that we have on video for the world to see, you know. So we did that a couple of times, and then she came up with the brigade members one time to Portland, and we interviewed everybody there. And then, spent a lot of other time, spent a lot of other time editing and finding all the archival material that you see in the film, you know, because we were always asking ourselves, well, what would it be like for someone to see this who doesn't know anything about this time period, you know, who doesn't know about a lot of the, liberation movements happening in the 60s even, you know, we needed to provide more context, we thought, you know, and so that's why we added a lot more material that you see in there, you know. And so I think that sort of answers your question about how it got started, right? But yeah, it has a very organic feel maybe, because it really took like many years of adding to it, and we never had any real funding for it, you know. We had a community-based kind of Kickstarter that had for a few $1,000s to help us take trips down there and stuff. But, you know, I am really just moved that so many people still are watching this very independent production, you know, like this is not on Netflix, not yet anyway, you know, and it was totally made by community support, you know, by Jane, by everybody connecting with us, with everyone else, by Bo opening up her house for us to stay there, you know. And so, so thank you all for continuing to share it. Let me know if you have other questions or anything.
I mean, I think one of the things that I really love about this film and that we don't see enough of, and I want you to reflect a bit on it, as well as Zulma and Jane, is the representation of butchness and the representation of the really kind of making it clear Bo's working class background. And so I guess my question to you, Julie, like, I think on one hand, I didn't know Bo, but I think on one hand, like, it seems like that's kind of like a part of who Bo was. And so it was sort of just in the fabric of who she was as a person. But I wonder, Julie, were there some decisions that you made in the making of the film that really foregrounded those elements, making them visible to us in ways that other representations kind of gloss over them?
Yeah, that's a great question. Thank you for bringing that in here. For sure. I mean, one person, well, I mean, sometimes it feels like it's throughout, you know, but you know, we had Aaron McNamara, who is a younger butch lesbian who had a lot of kind of, you know, you're talking about like an uncle feeling, you know, had that kind of sense of like, you know, someone that Erin was looking up to. And so Erin was with us almost as like a sort of, for a lot of reasons, you know, she has the radical politics, but also as like a Butch quality control person, you know, and so was there to have, they had special conversations, you know, that I might not have been able to think of myself, you know, and so I think a lot of things that you might see in there, like, maybe we're really facilitated because we had Erin there to kind of hold that space for like passing on of like Butch generational information like that. And so, you know, even like questions like there's a question where Bo's talking in front of her truck and Erin says something like, what was the hardest thing about being in prison? And I think she says like not being around other lesbian, you know, and I mean, maybe she would have said that no matter what, but I do think because we were talking about it all the time, that it kind of stuff like that came out more. You know, I don't know if this answers your question, but there's a couple of shots I really like where Bo's like taking something out of the oven very like tenderly and looking at it and smelling this thing she takes. But then we also put a shot right next to it of her like opening up her truck and like looking at stuff under the hood. And they kind of look very similar and they kind of show these couple sides of the way she's kind of caring for stuff in her world, you know, domestic spaces, but also these other kind of, you know, truck and exterior spaces, you know. And so not sure if I'm getting at your question, but those are some ideas I have, you know, and we wanted to make sure that we got into like some of the more, we didn't go enough really, but into, you know, stuff about like some of the places in Seattle that she talks about having to sort of, you know, run from the cops and things like that. You know, we wanted to make sure that information was in there because it's really important for younger generations to hear about that. So, yeah.
Yeah. And about, Julie, do you remember about what the budget was to make this film?
Well, that's what, I mean.
So that wasn't on, I know I'm off script, right? So I
No,
apologize.
but that was, I mean, really maybe $5,000, you know, we got like a small grant and we got $2,000 from friends giving us some money, you know, and most of that went to license like the stuff you see about the George Jackson Brigade, like the archival footage. Some TV company in Seattle wanted like $3,000 for that, you know, and so, but you know, and what should be community history, you know, and so, and then, you know, the rest was used to make the sound mix, like, because it was kind of all over the place and professionals can do magical stuff with it, you know.
Yeah, that's great. Jane and Zulma, what do you want to add about any of the things? But I think we're also thinking a bit about the butchness, working class, the film.
I now see Bo as an ancestor. You know, Bo also told me about a little bit about indigenous people. I wouldn't have known about Leonard Pertier if it wasn't for Bo. So I have my selection of ancestors, and Bo is on that list. The film, I wish it was longer because like she said, there's a lot of information, and I'm the one that has been bugging about bringing the film to Puerto Rico to the queer film festivals. So I think that would be also a good exposure because we could invite the ex-political prisoners over here and do something like that and talk about their experience also being with both. But I think this kind of film should go to universities as well. When talking about politics or any critical thinking or that you know students can create. I know that the solution these days is not to rob the banks, but that was necessary at that time. And if I was there with Bo, I probably would have joined and help out because those were desperate times when all the power was that had the money to keep oppressing, and the ones like us had to, you know, stretch the money to do our own activism or become Robin Hoods like both. So I really applaud that, and I wish there were more people who would do such a thing, not to rob, but to say, you know, I have so many millions, you know, why can't I balance a little bit of this society and maybe do reparations that way, and you know, reparations of land, for example. And I think Bo really taught me so many things in that sense that I know that I always will have appreciate that. And I will keep that
I
always in my heart.
I really liked the film, Julie, and I feel like it makes sense to me that there was a lot of unused footage and that you honed out some of it because you got so much of Bo just being Bo, and that's not always possible. So I understand what you're saying about Erin and her role, and a lot of conversations, and then, you know, on the camera, because that's what I really appreciated. One of the things I think I mentioned, okay, Bo's humanity, what her humanness, I mean, that she was just such a regular person, she really was. I don't know how else to get that across to people. She was an extremely regular butch freedom fighter, white working class woman. She was, even though she was all of those titles, she was just very regular with people, with all her friends, and with people on the street, or people in a store, or people in a coffee shop or something. She was very unique. I really miss Bo a lot. I love her a lot. I loved her. I love her, and I really miss her. And there's a few questions just to tell you.
Yeah, I was gonna, Jane, I wanted to show, Sierra has another clip that's just 1 minute. And I want to show that because it shows Jay Mullins. And I realized I forgot to say at the top of the hour that Jay was going to join us this evening and couldn't. So I wanted to get in this little clip from Jay. So Sierra, you can cue that up. And then we have a couple questions in the chat that I'm going to come to after we show this 1 minute clip of Jay.
Bo Bound Support Group was started by 4 other women. She was in prison. We would call her, we would give her our support and say, you know, we will hand out leaflets. We will show up at your court appearances. We will tell people who the George Jackson Brigade is. And we will send you money. We'll write you letters. I mean, I know that we did a lot of letter writing to the other members of the group along with Bo. It was a material support type of organization.
Everybody was always like really interested in what I always do. Butches are appreciated in prison in a different way in a women's prison than they are anywhere else in this country that I've ever been. Except maybe a lesbian bar. And then that depends on how butch you are and who the owner of the bar is. But let's see what else interesting happened.
Appreciated in what sense?
They want you. They like you.
You're hot shit.
You're hot shit.
I thought that was such a great, I love that clip. I think it gets at that, the humanity of Bo and Julie, as you were talking about, of of other people sort of involved in the film and people's capacity to see and tell different stories. We have a couple questions in the chat. Did we lose Zulma? we might have. So one question is from Chris: can the rest of the unpublished materials and the film footage be given to the Lesbian History Archives in Brooklyn? And then an add-on question: are there plans for your archival material from the making of this film?
Well, I guess that's for me. Sure. I happen to be located in New York right now. I think it would be a good time for me to connect with the Lesbian History Archives. Yeah, I mean, it seems like it really wouldn't be that if someone wants to take that on, you know, of like archiving this digital material, that would be wonderful. So I'll contact them. And what was your other question? What was it?
Are there any other plans to use the footage?
Well, you know, interestingly, Jane, I'm not sure if I've told you about this yet. I mean, one answer to your question is that an interesting use of the footage I've seen recently is that someone used like the still image we saw of her like speaking from that green chair, you know, like a kind of regular interview. Someone took a still of that and made a poster after Bo passed, you know, kind of, you saw that, like passing it around. So not only but actually it went a step further and is being made into like this collection of posters called the People's Histories poster series that someone else in Brooklyn puts out every year, like a dozen or something. So I helped him put some text on it that tells a little bit more about who Bo is, but it's basically what you saw, you know, but it's gonna be printed and, you know, I'll send you some for sure. But that's like, you know, maybe not exactly what you meant, but an interesting way that I never expected to see this go, you know, that someone took that photo and then now made a poster and then, but yeah, otherwise, no, I don't have any, I don't know that footage, like the extra stuff I have, the other interview material is being used for anything, no, but it could.
That is Just Seeds, and that's Joss McFay, right?
Yeah.
Just Seeds, if people want to look that series up, it's quite good. And someone also put in the chat, there's a Bay Area Lesbian Archives, which there is, yes.
And then Chris asks, is there still a version of Out of Control or another lesbian group supporting women prisoners in that material way that was spoken about?
There are other groups, but not, we were specifically supporting women political prisoners and Puerto Rican prisoners of war until they all got out, and that would be, and then we became more generalized support work, educational and advocating for women in prison in the state of California, as well as international and national. There are a number of groups in the Bay Area. The other event that we did around Out of Control, we did mention a bunch of them in the Bay Area. We did.
And in fact,
yeah, there you go. Great, Sierra.
We have them right here. These are some, and these are available on our website as well, but these are some organizations that are doing solidarity work with women in prison. Jane, correct me if I'm wrong. I don't think that there's one that is particularly doing supporting lesbians.
Well, a number of them do support lesbians and trans.
Okay.
Both. Like
Yeah.
that CCWP, California Coalition for Women Prisoners. A Black and Pink. Black and Pink is for LGBT.
Yeah. So there's,
I would look at Black and Pink and CCWP.
So there's a number of different solidarity formations that are happening right now with doing work for women in prison. And of course, Sinister Wisdom, we send about, of every issue, about 100 copies go to women who are inside. And we try to send, I also try to hunt up free books, like a collection of 80 or 90 free books every year that we then send as a special gift to women inside when we have a little extra postage money to make all of that happen. So Julie and Jane, thank you both so much for this conversation. We're almost near the top of the hour. Zulma, if you're watching on rerun, something happened, but we so appreciate your contribution as well. Thank you to everyone who joined us this evening. It's an incredible film. It's streaming for free on Julie's website. Julie also has a number of other film projects, so look at all of that when you receive that. Julie just dropped the link on Vimeo into the chat to watch the film. And just a quick advertisement as Sierra's getting ready to share our final dance song. We do have the Sinister Wisdom book club coming up. We're reading K-Ming Chang's new collection of short stories. That's wonderful and incredible. And then at the end of November, on November 29th, we're doing an event with Joan Nessel celebrating her new collection out from Sinister Wisdom as a Sapphic classic, A Sturdy Yes of a People, which we have done pre-orders on and will be available a little past the 29th of November. We're expecting to be shipping out all of those orders somewhere around December 15th. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.